Welcome, everyone. Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. Welcome to the Pacific Division Feeding Capacity Building Series. This series is brought to you by the Pacific Division Feeding Leadership. My name is Yi Wei. I'm a volunteer, and I will be your host for this session. We are extremely excited to welcome you all to our second session. We're thrilled that we saw 343 people attended our live session last week. Please type your name and region in the chat, and please say hi to each other. We'll be using the same Teams link for each session. I know we have different time zones, so please double check your time before joining us. It's 5:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. And it's also a good time to check your smoke alarm. Your camera and microphone have been disabled for this session. You're able to type your questions in the chat, and the microphone will be turned on again towards the end for questions and answers. I want to remind you to log in your hours onto Volunteer Connection. So this series is not a required course to obtain any group activity or position. It is designed to help all of us to build confidence and to share our best practices. You will also not receive EDGE credit because this is not an EDGE course, and there will not be any certificate given, unfortunately, for this series. But this will definitely help you to submit your packet, your promotion packets, and definitely will help you to build your confidence. The Pacific Division has 10 regions. That's Alaska region, California Gold Country region, Cascades region, Central California region, Idaho and Montana, Los Angeles region, Northern California Coastal region, Northwest region, Pacific Island region, and Southern California region. I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of territory to cover and we have different time zones. So for the Pacific Division, we cover the geographic areas of Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, California, Hawaii, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. I'm really, really happy to see all the familiar faces that we have in the chat, and I welcome all of you joining us if you're from outside of the Pacific Division or if you're from national headquarters. If you're not able to attend this live session, all the presentations are recorded and it will be published on YouTube. And a follow-up email with all the recording and slides will be sent out within a week. You're able to go on YouTube and search Pacific Division Red Cross, and you'll see all the videos. And the best part is all the recordings are there, including the shelter series that we did for 2 years. So you're able to see all of that. And now I'd like to pass over to Mary. Mary is our Pacific Division feeding lead. Mary, please take it away.
Thank you, Yi Wei, and good evening, everyone. I am really happy to be here tonight. And I know people say that a lot, but I truly am, because last week, as some of you know, I'm still here in Costa Rica, and we had sustained winds of 35 miles per hour with gusts up to 40, and unfortunately, internet was spotty at best. So I'm happy to report that the winds are very mild this evening, and we shouldn't have any issues. But I am certainly glad to be here to share both my experience and the experience of the other presenters with you. I want to say that the questions and the comments we got last week were outstanding. We've been able to reach out to all of the presenters, and many have tweaked their presentations to make sure they've covered your concerns, your issues, your questions. So before I pass it off to Jerry, I just wanted to give you a food for thought, a little quote, and it comes from Cesar Chavez. I was fortunate many years ago to march with him in the Central Valley of California. And he said, if you really want to make a friend, go to someone's house and eat with them. The people who give you their food give you their hearts. And I truly think that when we are giving food to our clients in the shelter, we are really giving them heart and we're giving them hope. So at that point, let me turn it over to the lead from the Northwest, Jerry.
Good evening. Hopefully you can all hear me. Will you let me know if I have any problems with people hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to be a very introductory presentation on how to be a great feeding associate. Some of you have the GAP of a feeding associate, which I've written down here, MCFFSA. That's your group activity and position. Some of you are mass care sheltering service associates. But in each case, I can tell you that on every DR I've been on, I've learned a little bit more of best ways to serve our clients. I had the benefit today of attending an after-action review from the Spokane fires, and the theme was, much to support what Mary just said, that one of our greatest successes was the food we were able to serve our clients, that they were happy to have hot meals, tasty meals, a variety of meals, and staff that was happy to be there and serve them. And I can say from experience on that, we didn't have a dedicated feeding team. Our shelter workers, our SA shelter workers actually did the serving. So you may be called upon that when you deploy to a DR. And so hopefully tonight I'll be able to give you some tips and advanced ideas of how you can become a great SA to support your DR. So the objectives tonight is to kind of explain what a feeding service associate is, and what are some of the best attributes for an SA. What kinds of opportunities are available? What can you do? And some tips for being the best you can possibly be. The first thing I would suggest is looking at the volunteer position description for a feeding associate, service associate. I'm having trouble with that tonight. It's to serve as a member of a temporary workforce on a disaster relief operation and ensure that food safety and proper food service in a variety of work locations work smoothly and effectively. This full description can be found on OneSource. If you search for the feeding service associate, you would be able to come up with the full position description, which then goes on to say that not all feeding positions or all feeding activities support a disaster, but for the purposes of disaster services, we're going to talk a little bit more about those activities. The responsibilities of a service associate at that point are meeting disaster-caused feeding needs of individuals, families, and communities, preparing and serving meals that meet required cultural, religious, and dietary sensitivities of clients. We don't cater to people's preferences all the time, though we do try to accommodate those as we can. But if there are religious and dietary allergies involved, we do try to accommodate those as best we can. We practice safe food handling at all times, and I am not going into the details of basic food handling. I'll refer to it quite often during tonight's presentation, but I'm not going to go into how to temp foods, what temps they should be, what temps they should be held at. That's going to be at a future training that we'll have a future segment of this series. Maintaining clear communication, that's both with your clients and with your chain of command and your other volunteers on your assignment. And then providing feedback, which is what we did today on our AAR. And I found it most valuable to hear surveys that had been returned by clients and by volunteers alike, and what they found to be successful and what things did not work. So I think the attributes of a great service associate are understanding, observing, participating, and communicating. I think it's important to take a moment before you're assigned your responsibility to understand what a service associate is, to understand your job description, to understand your goals, to go out and observe, be curious, find out what's going on the DR or wherever assignment you have, participate as actively as possible, and then again, communicate back. So what's my role? How do I understand what my role is? Well, Workforce Engagement is going to give you a call. They're going to say, we need a service associate, a feeding service associate, or a sheltering associate at a certain disaster or for some other role. And you're going to ask questions. Well, where am I going? What am I going to do? Those answers can be gotten from your IAP or from your workforce engagement person. I would suggest that you pay close attention to the job requirements and the hardship codes before you head out on a disaster. That'll help you decide whether or not you can fulfill the requirements of the job, or whether you will, if you have allergies or something, you may not want to go somewhere where there's a fire and smoke is in the air. You may not want to subject yourself to that. Who do I report to? I suggest that one of the things that you do is make sure your volunteer connection application is downloaded and ready for you to access as soon as you get the assignment to the job, because you're going to be able to find a lot of information about your job and your assignment right there in the volunteer connection app. And what are my tasks? You're probably not going to find out exactly what you're going to be doing until you get to the job site. And I'll say that it can change from the time you get on an airplane or pile into a car and drive to your assignment or fly to your assignment. Your role could change, and certainly your tasks could change. So flexibility, I think, is another part that I would like to emphasize as far as being understanding of your role. There's all kinds of disasters, and some of you that may have attended my previous talk in the region on working on a DRO, this will be kind of a review for that. You can be assigned to a local or regional disaster. There's also the regional and national disasters, strictly national disasters, and then among those, they're delineated by levels within those disasters. Level 1 disaster is pretty much your DAT calls, your disaster action team responds to those. Those are pretty much house fires and things like that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gradually get more complex. The disaster levels are an indication of the expected complexity of an operation, but they all begin at the local chapter and regional level. And then they may grow into a division or national disaster. We use various leadership organizational structures to support the different disasters. Once a level 4 is triggered, you'll have a lot of resources above you with dedicated focus. And if you are in a level 4 or above, you will more likely than not have a dedicated feeding team. But until you get to a level 4 disaster, you may or may not have a dedicated feeding team in place. There's all kinds of responses that you can be required to fulfill as a service associate too. Canteening is also called outreach feeding. It can be in a fixed location, a non-sheltered kind of location. We can serve clients at designated locations or near a disaster or an affected area. It can be for a multitude of reasons that we do canteening. And then there's our congregate and non-congregate feeding models. In a non-congregate shelter, our clients generally have a bed to themselves or a room at a hotel with their families. In a congregate situation, it's more of a dormitory setting, and our clients shelter together. They take meals together. They sleep together. And as the name implies, it's congregate living. there's differences in feeding on those kinds of DROs. In a congregate setting, you most likely have food deliveries or food pickup to accomplish. There may be some food preparation. We don't do as much as we used to because we don't cook on the prem most generally. We like to have posted meal times so that we know that there's a start and stop time, that our clients can be assured that food will be there. We also may be able to use kitchens that have refrigerators, stoves, and microwaves for reheating some of our foods. And then we have the opportunity to store leftovers. And we may be serving clients both inside and outside the dormitory shelters. If you have a setting on a congregate DRO where there are outside clients who may be staying in their cars, maybe in a motorhome or a trailer or some other kind of vehicle, tents even in an outside area, you will probably see them coming in for meals. So it's important that you have them sign in and out if they're not a registered client inside, so that you're aware of the people who are coming in for meals, and you take account of those people so that you can have accurate meals on hand. In a non-congregate setting, you may also, again, have food deliveries or pickup. And you may also be doing a mobile feeding where you would use herbs to drive around affected areas of a disaster. For instance, in Hurricane Ian, after the danger of the hurricane and the floodwaters had subsided and that people were back into their neighborhoods trying to assess the damage and do cleanup work, they still hadn't had power or utilities returned as services. So they were working real hard, and they were just delighted to see our herbs drive through with food for them for both lunch and dinner. We also use fixed feeding sites, which is where you'll actually park maybe an herb, or you may take food to a church and distribute it from a church community room. It's a fixed site where people come to you to receive their meals, both lunches and dinners when we have them available. On a non-congregate, you will most often have a feeding supervisor or manager, someone that's directing your activities, giving you your routes, telling you what kinds of foods we're going to serve, telling you when we're going to stop service to those areas so that we can notify our clients. And there's a lot more coordination in the non-congregate shelter feeding model than there is in the congregate shelter feeding model. Whoops. Okay, so if you're assigned to a DRO, which is a disaster relief operation, the supplies that you'll need will be based on the time of opening. When you originally, for a local disaster like a apartment fire, where they don't often happen during the middle of the day, but they do, but sometimes they happen at night or close to dinner time. So based on the time of opening, you may be required to have some snacks available or some food if it's around the dinner time. So your immediate supplies will change based on the time of opening. You may use a P card, which is a purchasing card that is used by and issued to certain volunteers who are able to go out and purchase supplies for your feeding effort. So if you have a P card or you know someone who has a P card, they can run out and purchase provisions for your disaster. This isn't to be confused with a mission card, which is personally issued to you. That's not for supporting the DR. It's for your personal necessities. So don't use your mission card. There's another type of card called an MCPC card, which is a mission-related card, but specifically to a shelter or on a specific DRO. So there's 3 kinds of cards, but the mission card is not used for anything other than your personal supplies. So keep that in mind when you're out on a DRO or you've been assigned as a service associate. Feeding kits are part of your shelter trailers as a general rule, but I've found when I go out on different, even in different chapters in our own region, so it's kind of important if you open the feeding kit as soon as you can to see what they keep in their feeding kit. They could have can openers, they could have thermometers, they could have hot mats, they could have cookie sheets, they could have a variety of things you might use to reheat foods, but also to test foods and keep food safe. Coordinate with your logistics department if you can, or your logistics lead, to get some of the items that you may need to meet the immediate needs of your clients as they begin to arrive at your DRO or your shelter. We always like to have sweet and salty snacks, a coffee and tea service set up. Sometimes we have assorted juices, water, and we should have paper goods and utensils on hand to so that individual can take their snacks and their coffee, tea, or their beverages with them. Those can all be gotten through your logistics department or using a P card.
Jerry, before you jump into the next slide, we have a question that comparing congregate versus non-congregate feeding. Wouldn't the congregate also have a feeding supervisor or manager so they can be supervised?
Not always a dedicated feeding supervisor. Sometimes your shelter supervisor will assign a shelter SA to perform a feeding function, but that you may not have a dedicated feeding manager or feeding supervisor. Now you can, and we've had service associates show up just at meal times to help distribute the foods to our clients. But there are times when you won't have on level 3, level 2, level 1s, you may not have. And I'll specifically say on apartment fires where we've had 20 to 40 clients, we don't have a dedicated feeding manager or a feeding supervisor. That's handled by the shelter manager. Now, there may be somebody that's procuring food for you or coordinating with your external partners through your external relations department that's helping you. But you're always going to report up then through whoever you have been assigned to as your supervisor. But I know that's something that we've been pushing for as a feeding team, is having leadership in place, supervisors and above. But is it always the case? No. And if anybody in the feeding leadership wants to speak to that and provide some additional input, please. But that's my experience. Does that help?
So
Jerry.
what I'm hearing is that you will always have a supervisor that you report to. Doesn't matter if that supervisor is a dedicated feeding supervisor that has a feeding gap group activity position, you will always have someone that you report to that can supervise you. And depending on the level of the disasters or depending on the scope and the scale of the disasters, when you have a local multifamily fire that you open a shelter for with 5 clients, and that feeding person that is doing the feeding in the shelter might report directly to the shelter person in charge in the shelter, and then they report to either the sheltering lead in the headquarters or the mass care lead in the headquarters. Am I capturing that right?
Yes.
Anyway, this is Mary. Let me just address real quickly for the group.
Please.
One of the reasons you may not have a dedicated feeding supervisor in a level 3 or level 2 is, quite frankly, the Pacific Division is very, very, very short of feeding supervisors. And Jerry's right. We've been pushing to, as a group, to get more feeding supervisors in the Pacific Division, helping people who want to move up from SAs so that they can assist. We will be working with people who want to move up, and then hopefully we will have more dedicated positions on all of our DROs.
Thank you. Let's continue.
Thank you. Okay, so when you first come on the job and you're working in a congregate feeding facility, I would suggest that you meet with your supervisor right away. There should be a job orientation with your supervisor, at which time you should confirm your access to the facility's kitchen. You may be assigned in a school, you may be assigned in a church, you may be in some kind of other facility, a fairgrounds or something, and you'll need to find out where is the kitchen and what kind of access do we have to that kitchen, because there's always cleaning that needs to be done. You're also going to have to confirm, where do we serve our food to our clients? Is there a separate feeding area, or do we just have tables set up in the general common area that they can eat in, or do they have a dedicated place where they can go in, pick up their food, and then sit down and eat? We also have to confirm use of the kitchen appliances. There's a lot of times when kitchen appliances are off limits to volunteers when we're working in a facility. There's sometimes when we just give carte blanche and we're able to use anything in the kitchen as long as we put it back the same way we found it. To see if there's a microwave. That's kind of important for people who miss meal times. For instance, they have shift work and they come in late. We know that they're going to be late, and we properly store and maintain their food until they come back, and then they can microwave it, or we can microwave it for them, and then they can have their meal when they arrive back at the shelter. During the Spokane fires, we had no refrigeration, and we had more food than we could possibly handle from donors. The community here in Spokane was very generous with their food. Restaurants were bringing us more than we could even serve, but we had no refrigeration to store it. So be aware of the use of the refrigerator and how you can use it. Sometimes you'll have to share a refrigerator with the church facility or the school. Learn. I've been left in a shelter before where I had no idea how to use the automatic coffee maker. Some of them are plugged into water systems and automatically refill themselves with water. Some you have to run down the hall, grab a pot, fill it with water, and fill up the reservoirs. So make sure that you know how to run the coffee makers, and if there will be hot water available to you. When you're in the kitchen, definitely be aware of the separation of the shelves. Make sure you're storing food properly on the shelves. Again, that goes to the basic food handling guidelines, which I'm not going to discuss right now. That's for a later date. Can we use pots and pans? Are there commercial sinks available for us to wash anything that we may use? Because we do use serving utensils, things like that do need to be properly cleaned. Are there cleaning supplies on hand? If your logistics trailer, your shelter trailer didn't arrive, and with cleaning supplies on board, make sure that those are some of the things that you get right away. Are the mops and brooms available to you to help clean up the feeding area? There's lots of crumbs and there's lots of waste that is generated. There's messes to clean up, especially if you have young children in your facility. So make sure you have access to mops and brooms. Understand where the outside trash is. Are you going to have access to maintenance workers for your facility? And some of the schools, they will provide janitorial service that takes your trash out for you and puts it in the big bins outside. But how often we fill those bins up, believe me, with excess with waste from feeding and other waste from our clients. So we tend to fill the outside garbage bins quite quickly with that many people staying there full time all day and all night. So it's important to find out what the pickup schedule is. And then who do you contact if something goes wrong? Your shelter manager should have that information, but it's incumbent upon you to ask for that too if you're working, so that you know who to contact if your shelter manager isn't available. In congregate feeding, it's important also to post hours. This helps both you and the clients understand, and also anybody that you're working with, partner relationships to bring in food. Salvation Army or any of the food delivery services that you may use. We need to be very clear with our clients what our posted feeding hours are. What time do we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner? We also need to be alert and understand what kind of food restrictions there are. In an apartment fire a couple years back, it was almost 80% a requirement that we have halal foods for those people, and making sure that our restaurants were halal, capable of providing halal meals for our the people that required those. Also, we can ask if people need bagged lunches. Do we need to give them, are there children that are going out and catching the school bus? Remember, these people still have lives. They've been displaced. They still have to carry on with their lives. And in some flooding down in central Washington, the school district made arrangements to bring a bus out to our facility at the fairgrounds and pick up all the school children. And we sent them with bagged lunches from the Salvation Army to go to school, and then people that were on shift work. So be aware of that. You can mentor and work as a local or event-based volunteer to get some experience. We used event-based volunteers in some of our larger disasters to help serve food, which is a case where as long as you have one food certified person supervising your kitchen, you can use EBVs to help serve people that may or may not have their certificate from their county or state. You need to learn how to report and communicate meals and snacks to your supervisor. If you're an SA, most often or not, are you going to enter that information into the appropriate reporting tools. However, your supervisor or your manager needs that information and it gets reported up. So learn how they want you to communicate and report meals and snacks and how often they want that. You provide them with that information. And then don't forget the outside clients. When you're counting food and meals that are going to be needed for the next day, you can do your best guess of how many people are still going to be there, how many people you're going to need. And it's okay when you're feeding them dinner to say, will you be joining us for lunch and dinner tomorrow? That kind of gives you an idea of what their intentions are or whether they're expecting to find other accommodations and leave. And fixed and mobile feeding site. These I find, if you're working especially with hotels and motels, those have been the most challenging in my experience. You have to work with hotel staff, and quite often in the swankier upscale hotels, you will not have access to kitchens or breakfast rooms. They don't allow that. But then they also won't give you information about who's in what room. So that's important that you you have a list of the people, of the clients at each hotel. If you're an SA and you're ready to serve, if you can get a list out of Skya or from your supervisor of the residents in that hotel, what room they're in and how many are in each room, and a contact phone number for them. We still post our feeding hours when we let them know when they're coming, what our general feeding times are. But in a hotel or motel situation, it's a little bit tricky to get meals to those clients. If you are lucky enough to be able to use the breakfast room, then they can all come down and we can serve them their meals all at the same time. If you can't use the kitchen or breakfast room, then you have a little bit more challenging opportunity to help get meals to those clients. Again, you still have to understand any special dietary needs. So as they come down to claim a meal, make sure that you're communicating with them. Was last night's meal good? Were there any things that you didn't eat? Because if you're not in a congregate situation, you can kind of watch people pick the meat off of a pizza or throw hot peppers in the garbage or things like that. And you kind of get an idea of people's preferences. In a non-congregate feeding situation, you may not have that luxury. So it's okay to ask people questions. Okay, so observation. That's another important attribute of an SA. Observe if people seem to be coming late to meals, if they seem to be coming early. Have we not communicated the feeding times properly? Keep an eye on the snacks. When you're replenishing snacks, it's kind of a good idea to look and say, oh, you know what? Our clientele doesn't really care for apples and bananas and oranges. They seem to prefer the sweet and salty snacks. Well, that helps you request additional snacks in the proper proportions for helping feed that client population. Are there enough meals available? Wow, we only had 10 people last night and 15 people showed up tonight. We had to feed them alternative meals based on the amount of people that showed up. So we need to adjust our feeding as we're able to observe if there are enough meals or if we're getting that out sufficiently. Sorry about that. And again, how much waste are we generating? Do we have excess meals? Are we putting a lot in the refrigerator? And are we meeting the dietary needs of our clients? Participate, clean the serving areas whenever you see they need attention. Make sure that when you're cleaning the areas that you're looking at the labels of your cleaning supplies and only use food safe disinfectants. Make sure you absolutely read the labels because not all wipes, disinfectant wipes, are food safe. Special meals, again, talk to clients and health services team. Be proactive. Volunteer to go out and do grocery runs. This assumes that you've already passed your safe driving and course and you qualify to drive RC vehicles if you volunteer to go do a grocery run. Organize and clean out refrigerated foods and monitor the excess food storage. Those are all helpful ways an SA can help things move smoothly. Again, you need to communicate how many meals did we serve, what types of foods are enjoyed, do we need any go bags for people that are leaving for work, do they need lunches, are there children that need things, what snacks are most popular. Already talked about most of that. Do we have sufficient supplies? Keep an eye on baggies and things that you can store excess food in if you need to.
Jerry, I'd like to pause you for a little bit to answer some of the questions that in the chat. Would that be okay? We have one comment early on that when we put everything in the fridge, let's make sure that we label Red Cross and label the date and time so we know it's ours, it's not belongs to the facility. And the question we have is, Michael thought we were only to accept food from commercial kitchens and not from local home kitchens. Is that still true?
That is correct. We don't connect. Yes, only commercial foods.
Thank you so much. And Dennis has a question. Is it permissible to use a purchase card, P card, for fuel purchases when picking up or deliver food, especially when we have multiple locations and the trip is quite long?
A lot of times your P card won't work for fuel purchases if you try to use it at the pump. I have used a P card for fuel purchases at the going inside. I have used my P card for that.
Hey, Mary, would you like to chime in as well?
Yes, part of that actually, technically, no. That's the technical answer. However, if you're using a Red Cross vehicle or an IRV, there should be a credit card with that, a fuel card actually, and that's what you should be using. If you're using your personal mission card, you're using your personal car, you can then use your mission card to put gas in it. And even though you're delivering to shelters, you would just reimburse yourself through the reimbursement process with a receipt for that gas. So the basic answer is, please try not to use your P card for fuel. That's really not what we're supposed to do at all.
Okay, and so let's make a situation a little smaller. Let's say just this is a local operation. There's no mission card issued. There's no mission card issues, and there's no MCPC card, mass care procurement card issued. And this is a local operation, but you have a big geographic territory to cover. Are you able to ask your logistic team and say, hey, we need a fuel card. Can we request a fuel card? Or can we actually reserve a vehicle to use the fuel card in that vehicle?
My recommendation.
Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, the answer is you should always have a Red Cross vehicle if you're performing Red Cross functions. Not every car, well, yes, they all should have fuel cards, but if you have not passed the driver thing, you don't have the PIN for some of those fuel cards. So you have to make sure that you are a qualified Red Cross vehicle driver in order to use the fuel card, because you've been issued a PIN to use with that fuel card. Now, that is not the same for driving IRVs and MRVs, which have fuel cards and their own PINs associated with them. But again, they haven't transitioned completely in every region, in every division, to that model, but that's the model that they're moving toward right now. Mary, did you have something to add on that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So yes. So in summary, is that when in doubt, reach out to your supervisor so your supervisor can communicate with logistics to see what's the best way to refuel your vehicle. Okay, Carmela has a question that, do feeding service associates or service supervisors, managers, or event-based volunteers need to have the certification or training for emergency response vehicles for the specialty track in order to be a feeding volunteer?
For the emergency vehicle specialty tract, yes, you do. But in any other case, you can have one person who has that permit available to supervise and ensure that basic food safety is managed. Now, an EVB that is sitting as a service associate, been assigned to your IRV, there's two drivers, there's a navigator and a driver, but you have a jump seat in an IRV, a third person. That person does not have to have a certificate or a permit to serve food, but they have to be supervised by whoever is driving, has a specialty tract. That is my understanding.
Thank you. So in short is that you can still do feeding without the IRV specialty track emergency response vehicle, but in order to drive the emergency response vehicle, you would have to have the specialty track. Okay, and Joseph has a question that could you please elaborate on what does the outside clients mean?
Oh, okay. So quite often we have situations where clients don't feel comfortable sleeping inside the shelter. And so we have made arrangements with the facility for, and this particularly has happened in the large California fires when we're out at a community college. I remember out in Susanville, we had a huge outside client base. People that had brought their motor homes, their tents, and preferred to stay outside rather than inside. So it's like a complimentary shelter, and it's actually entered into SKIA, which is our client intake application, as a separate shelter, and you track your clients separately in your outside shelter. But it's associated with your main facility lodging, your indoor shelters.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that outside clients are our clients. They're receiving some sort of services from us, but they're not staying in the indoor shelters. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Jerry, I see we have 15 minutes left, and I see we still have a lot of questions. Would you like to continue your slides and we'll go to the question later?
Yeah, that'll work for me. I'm going to wind it up pretty quick here anyway.
Sure, thank you. Let's continue.
Okay. Okay. So communication, just make sure that we have everything we need. So opportunities. I guess this is what I really want to emphasize for people is there are many opportunities for you to get involved with the feeding activity. And as this is a capacity building series of workshops or activities here, we want to really encourage people to get involved with feeding. We are really, really shallow in our feeding resources, especially at the supervisory and managing activities, which is going to be another segment of this series. And they'll talk to us about the opportunities that exist for supervision and management, which on larger DROs can be, well, a lot of duties are associated with feeding in that case. So I would recommend that you attend your chapter and regional meetings, find out who the people in feeding are, and if you're interested in it, find out who can be a mentor. Talk to your DPM about people in your chapter that can bring you along or promote you or help you get the education that you need. Let your DPM know that you want to be assigned to start small if you want, a cooling shelter or an apartment fire, a multifamily fire or something where you can start small with a small number of clients and you can get comfortable doing all the responsibilities of an SA. If you have opportunities to support tabling events, service to armed forces or any canteening events, do that as well. And then we're all, and everyone in our division can tell you, we have blue sky or steady state work, which we're not involved with a disaster, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work, such as getting contracts for local restaurants, getting agreements, finding restaurants that are willing to support disasters, food service and upcoming disasters. So we do a lot of work during the steady state that actually helps our disasters go much smoother, and we can get food to our clients a lot faster if we're not making a ton of phone calls to restaurants at random, just trying to find someone who can meet our feeding needs. I would ask you to build relationships. I think one of the best ones is, get to know your shelter teams, get to know your logistics people. Ask if you can assist in inventorying a shelter trailer. That'll get you familiar with what's inside a shelter trailer. What do you have access to when it arrives at your disaster or your feeding location? Review the feeding toolkit on OneSource from time to time. It's sometimes updated. It hasn't been updated for a while, but it will be updated, and there will be new information from time to time. Be flexible and adaptable when you get out there and be ready to take on a field promotion. You may be a feeding SA right now today, and that's maybe your comfort zone, but you may be asked to move into a supervisory position once you get to the job. It all depends on depth of volunteers and breadth of service. Complete the IRF specialty track training. It's a fun way to get out and interact with the clients, but it's also can be a good way of taking a pulse on what's happening in your community at the disaster. You can tell if areas are cleaning up faster than other areas, and you can communicate this back to headquarters so that they know. And then my last one I'll go through really quickly, because I found from my mentor that it's best to take a little go bag with you. My go bag is no bigger than a gallon Ziploc, and in it I have hand sanitizers. I have 2 different colors of gloves, one for cleaning, one for serving people. So I never forget that if I'm wearing my cleaning glove, I am not going to hand them a snack or serve them a beverage. I also like to have the food service gloves that can slip over the nitrile gloves, because your hand gets really sweaty in the nitrile gloves, and it's easy to put a disposable glove over that, the plastic kind that you can just slip off and change as you need it. It's a lot quicker. I bring a hair covering and disposable apron. I have a mask because I keep a first aid kit, a teeny little Red Cross first aid kit with me, because you can get a cut or a scrape or a hangnail or anything, and then you need to keep that covered even if it's in a glove. It's kind of an extra layer of protection for our clients and for ourselves. A notebook, just little tick marks, notes to self, supplies you may need, how many clients we fed. Notebook is important. I keep a thermometer in there. I may get somewhere and the kit hasn't arrived, the food kit hasn't arrived, and I need to temp food. So I keep a thermometer handy. I bring my Sharpie pen and my blue tape, again, to your point of labeling the food. Quite often that might not be in your kit. So I keep a small roll of blue tape and a Sharpie marker where I can write on the food the date that it was consumed, or the date that it was used, and when we need to throw it out, and that it is a Red Cross food. I keep a cell phone with access to Skya and my emergency phone numbers on that. And the little extras, I carry a can opener and a flashlight. And those are just because I even keep those in my go bag for wherever I go, as a flashlight and a can opener and a corkscrew. But I don't need that corkscrew on a DR very often. So that is the end of my presentation. And again, it was just to introduce you to some tips and tricks and ideas for being the best SA that you can.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you for joining us and teaching us how to do all those. You just finished 2-day after action review in Spokane, and thank you so much. Before we jump into questions and hands, etc., Mary, would you like to share with us what our next session is about?
Let's go with the questions first while I pull that up.
Great. So several things to remind everyone. Next session will be the same link. All 10 sessions will be the same exact link. It's 5:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. I know I've said it multiple times. I feel guilty when I see people either miss the meeting or join meeting early because they didn't see the time difference. And in the resources link, I also included a list of every region's disaster workforce engagement on their contact information. So if you need any training information, questions on who your disaster program manager is, how to get a Red Cross email address, how to submit your promotions package, etc., you can reach out to your disaster workforce engagement person that I attached on the email. Okay, Jerry, let's go to questions. Several questions we want to get out first. One is, does the feeding team also feed pets? We know we feed pets, but do the feeding team feed the pets?
No, we no longer do. No, we don't. It's up to the client to feed their pet, or we have the pet liaisons and the pet. Boy, I don't even know the nomenclature of pet, but the short answer is we don't feed them personally. No. We can provide food. We can provide food. We can make sure our logistics team brings us food for our clients to feed them, but we don't feed pets. If that's what you're asking, if we actively walk over, put food in the bowl and feed the pet, we don't do that. But we can make available food for pets.
Thank you. And Kay, would you like to share that as well?
Yeah, the feeding of pets is now done through the Pet Liaison program through sheltering. So we will have someone on staff who will be partnering with a local animal agencies. Now, this is true in most of our shelters, all of our shelters. So we'll have a facility that'll be adjacent to the shelter, if possible. And it will have crates, and it will have food, and it will have water bowls. It will have everything that is needed for pets to be able to stay there. When they stay there, the food is provided and everything is provided for them, but the client is responsible for taking care of that pet. So they'll need to go in and they'll need to give them walks and clean up after their pets and everything that is normally done with pets. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Kay. And Kay is our Pacific Division Mass Care Lead. Okay, and we have several questions on snacks. So Jerry, what is our current snack protocols? And do we still count snacks? How do we report our snack counts, etc.?
On a larger DO where you have the logistics brings around, oh gosh, I can't remember, E3. They will bring snacks and it's up to logistics to count them and keep track of them. We just let them know what we need when we're running low and everything. And I'm still confused because I have been on places recently where I was told to count snacks, which I did. I don't know where the snacks are reported, particularly anymore. But, Kay, can you answer that one better? Because I think you just had experience with that again.
We don't.
Yeah.
Because I think we don't count snacks anymore.
Right.
That's correct.
The snacks that are given by the E3, which is a logistics truck that comes around to each shelter, those are not counted. The shelter folks are responsible for counting all snacks that are handed out. In terms of feeding, that is going to be part of, if you're in a kitchen and you're taking them out on an herb, then you would count them. But I would check with whoever is on site, because you're right, this has been kind of a point of contention. Nobody quite knows what to do. So really, you should check with your supervisor to find out whether you are counting snacks and in what capacity you would be counting them in. But really, that is more of a sheltering question, unless you're serving out of a kitchen, serving out of an herb, and then you would check with your supervisor. I wish I had a more definitive answer, but it goes back and forth.
I wish I did too, because it's the same question a lot of the time.
So Jerry and Kay, this is Mary. I will confirm again with our national leader, Lauren Myers, that we do not, in fact, count snacks. And I will have that answer for you at the beginning of the next session. And let me just tell you real quickly, the next session is going to be really exciting. It's titled, "Why is it important to get it right? And is it really a matter of life and death?" We're going to talk about shelter safety. We're going to talk about, food safety, shelter cuisine, nutritional values from the Red Cross. We're going to talk about all the special dietary requirements. It's going to be exciting.
Thank you so much, Mary. Okay, I do see that we have 7 seconds left. We will go ahead and address all the questions in the email format. I want to thank everyone for joining us today again. And this session will be uploaded to YouTube, and the follow-up email will be sent within a week. Thank you so much all. Have a great day.